Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. And today what we're going to be talking to you about is how you can build a bridge from employee to business owner.
Which I'm excited for this podcast because we're partly diving into more about, I was upside down, Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant. And just to summarize, what he devised is this quadrant of where we generate our income. And on the left side, we have employees and people that are self-employed. And then on the right side, we have business owners and investors. And what he's trying to teach, as we are as well, is how we can get from that left side to the right side. Mm-hmm. We want to create financial freedom. And just like the way Robert Kiyosaki defines it, it's our passive income is more than our monthly expenses. Or we abbreviate passive income with PI, and the monthly expenses ME, which is me. Just so if you couldn't figure that out, Cameron. So the goal is we want our pie to be bigger than us, right? And one of the best ways to do that is creating a business. And well, in this podcast, we talk a lot about real estate, particularly rental real estate. Now, that would be in the I category because that's where you are an investor. Mm-hmm. And there's advantages to each section, but with an investor, it's more passive. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of your time.
Yeah.
Right. But on the downside, particularly for real estate, like there's only so much you're going to really gain, right? You can only raise your rent so much. Appreciation can only go up so much. But you also, it's a lower risk because we have that asset or that collateral backing it up. With a business, that's going to be different. Mm-hmm. Like we don't have as much collateral, but we don't have a ceiling.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to get to that financial freedom, real estate is a great way, but the fastest way is going to be creating your own business. And that's what we're going to be talking about is how do we get from that left side, the employee and the self-employed, over to that business owner so we could enjoy some financial freedom.
Yeah, there's two things that kind of come to my mind when you're talking about businesses or when we talk to business owners is every business owner has had experience with some sort of failure along the way. And believe it or not, I enjoy talking to business owners about those failures, right? Because those are learning experiences. And just this morning, I had a conversation with a guy, and I forget the exact quote, but essentially he said something along the lines of, the first $1 million I made, I pissed it away, right? Because I was young and immature. He's like, but the second $1 million I made propelled me on to my third. And so I think there's a lot of value, right, in talking to business owners and learning from some of the mistakes that they made along the way. And the other idea that kind of comes to mind is that success as a business owner is it's a poor teacher, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the analogy or the example that I think of when I kind of think of that quote is actually my son Declan. Mm-hmm. We've had him in jiu-jitsu classes for about a month, and to be honest, he joined with his buddy, and his buddy's a little bit smaller than him, so he's going to these classes. And they teach him a move, and he just kind of manhandles the kid into kind of submissions.
Wait, so who manhandled who?
Declan's manhandling his little buddy, right? Okay. And so I've been talking to him. I'm like, man, I don't know how much you're actually learning, right, in this scenario. I was like, so, man, if you get a chance, match up with the kid over there, right? And this kid is the best kid in the class. And so it was last week, and he matched up with this kid 2 days in a row. And the first day he got his butt kicked. He got his butt handed to him, right? This kid is messing around. But at the very end of the day, Declan snuck in an armbar on this kid. And so he was pretty excited about that. Day 2, he comes back and they get matched up again. And I think this kid was coming back for him. But he was beating him down. Anyways, the long story short is that in those 2 days, I could see a progression in Declan that he had progressed way more than he ever had in the previous, month or so. And I think that's kind of indicative or indicative of a lot of business owners is, you don't learn much when things are going super smooth and everything's going great. It's when things go sideways and they get tough is when you really start to understand your business and some of the systems that you have in place.
Perfect. That is a great story. Now, so let's talk about how we can learn to become a B.
Okay.
One thing Robert Kiyosaki talked about is it's not as important of what you need to do to become a B. It's more of what you need to become, right? Because a lot of the mentally, this is going to be different,
Yeah,
than being an employee or self-employed.
Yep.
And in part, like you talked about, we learn from failure. Failure is good.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're an employee, like what are you taught, or what happens if you fail as an employee?
No,
You could get fired.
You get yelled at and or fired.
You get in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's a problem also with our school system. It's
Yeah.
always you got to be right. Like there's only one right answer.
Yeah.
But in the real world, there's a lot of different ways. So of making that transition, a lot of it's going to have to be mental.
Yeah.
Like we need to prepare for different things,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's going to be a different mindset.
Yeah. And what I've seen over the years is learning how to become a business owner is you're usually kind of raised in one of two environments. Is number one is you're raised in that family business,
Mhm.
right? So let's say your parents or somebody have a business and you're brought into that and they're teaching you kind of how to operate and oversee the systems and the people
Mhm.
that run this thing, right? And then the other option is if you don't have a family business is you've got to go out there and you got to learn this stuff on your own.
Mm.
Right. And so you're starting from square one. And so that's what we'll kind of transition into is we'll talk about, some of the ways that you can quickly become a B in both of those situations.
Right.
Yeah. And so let's talk about those, right? What are three, the three ways that we can accelerate our process or our journey to become a business owner?
Well, the most common one or what most people think about is more of your traditional business.
Yeah.
Right. And now what that means is whatever product or service you're selling, you're going to have to create the system yourself.
Yeah.
And really a business, what a business really is, if you narrow it down to the simplest terms, a business is a system you have to sell a product or service.
Mhm.
And just to reiterate how important systems are, let's talk about hamburgers.
Let's do it.
Right?
Yeah.
Who makes the best hamburger, would you say?
Mama.
Mama, exactly, right? Mama. But how many burgers did Mama sell last year?
0.
Right? How many did McDonald's sell?
Several million.
Like, I don't
Billion,
know,
yeah.
right? But a lot more than Mama did, right?
Mhm.
But here's an example. Mama has a better burger, but McDonald's is made a business of it.
Yeah.
And it's not because they have a better burger. It's because they have a better system.
Yeah.
That you're going to get that crap. Well, I want to say crappy because there may be some people who like McDonald's, but you're going to get that McDonald's burger wherever you go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've traveled overseas. If I go to McDonald's, I know those French fries are going to be good, and all that's going to be good. But they have that system. So if we're going to start a business, it's really important to make sure that we develop those systems.
That's funny you say that is because I think I've eaten more McDonald's when I'm overseas or out of the country than I ever have when I'm in the States, right? Is you go over there and you see McDonald's and your expectation is here, right? But it's always being met just by that kind of run-of-the-mill burger.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, so 3 ways that we can kind of accelerate this journey. First way that we're kind of going to do this is let's talk about finding a mentor. Anthony, you've had several successful businesses. What has been your experience with finding a mentor and or mentors?
I would say even going wider than businesses, with me achieving my goals, I've had to have a mentor.
Yeah.
Whether it was like in school playing sports or in the Army or my first job, like really to be successful, we ideally want to learn from people who have been there and done that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important in your job or in sports, but in business, it's super important. And in part, like even with sports, you kind of already know how to play soccer or play the sport.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's videos or you've been doing it for little or you've learned about it. They don't teach you how to run a business.
Mm-mm.
in school or even in college or even in an MBA.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why it's so important to have a mentor, because you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And as you'd mentioned, we're going to learn from those. But a mentor is going to, I think, allow us to maybe make a little bit less and learn even more. So like when we first started like infinite banking, like there was no infinite banking school. Right. And I even went around to financial planners in the area and people who sold life insurance. They had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
Right. But if we wanted to learn, we actually had to fly on our own dime in the Midwest, middle of nowhere in some small town to learn from our mentors. And we've even, I've even gone, fortunately, instead of going to Kansas, a couple of times we've gone to Mexico.
Yeah.
Which is, no offense to Kansas, but it's a lot more fun going there. But I've had to take that opportunity to find mentors.
Yeah.
And I've also had mentors, like some of these we had to pay for the class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
But we've also had mentors, who we didn't have to pay for. Right. But I would say anybody who's successful, most time they want to, they have an abundant mindset.
Yeah.
They're more than willing, if you ask, to share the ideas. The problem is most people ask, but then they never execute them.
Yeah.
Right. So, but those mentors, those people that you're working for, or maybe in a business that you might want to get in, ask them. Most of them are going to be very open and helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about some mentors in your life, Cam?
As you were talking, I was kind of thinking back, is the only time that I think I've really kind of gone after or pursued a mentor was with IBC, right? As I was looking and trying to find someone to teach it to me. And
and that's how we met. But anyways,
and I'm so thankful for that fateful day. Yeah. No, that was the first time I really went and sought out after a mentor. And, fortunately, as I look back, I would say probably my dad was probably the biggest one as far as kind of looking at certain areas. And then just other brothers in Christ, when you look for kind of, how to raise a family, how to be a good husband, right? You talk to them about that. And then on the business side, kind of now is we've got our mastermind group that I think is definitely kind of plays more of a mentorship kind of role for me personally. Is there's a lot of guys in there that are doing things, and their business is where I want our business to be. So, right, that's invaluable.
As we had mentioned, it's so important to have a system when you have a business. And because what happens, where typically a lot of times we're in that S, where that self-employed.
Yeah.
We're like, I remember when I wanted to grow, so I hired somebody, but then they didn't do it as good as me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? Okay, you can go. I'm just going to do it myself.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting any farther than I was before. And where I failed was I didn't have a system.
Yeah.
So the next time I took some time and developed a system so this is what you do on a tax return. This is what you do here. It did take some more time up front, but also once I did it, I only had to do it once.
Yeah.
And maybe I tweaked it, but then when the next, that employee doesn't work out, well, you know what? You have that system. You just plug them into the system. And what had really helped me was this book called The E-Myth. And if you're looking at developing systems, highly encourage you to check that book out. And it really goes into the why and the how of you to develop those systems in your business.
Yeah. So let's kind of move on. Would we just to recap that first point, is we're talking about how we can accelerate our progression from the left side of the quadrant over to the right side of the quadrant. And really, like you talked about before, you introduced it as a traditional business model. And if you're going to go that route, then we got to find a mentor. We got to find somebody that's there, somebody that's done it. And that's going to be the quickest way. The second way is to tap into somebody else's systems, which is buying a franchise, right? And we've had two really, really experienced and knowledgeable guests on our podcast, Sarah Brown, which you know very well, and then also Lance Growlich, which was a more recent guest. And so we'll be sure to share those two podcasts in the show notes with you guys. But when you look at a franchise, kind of the pros of a franchise is systems. You're buying a system that's already in place. And the other pro is that banks really like to lend to systems, not people. On the downside of it is if you look at buying a franchise, they are really, or they can be very expensive. And I have a good friend of mine that he is he's the managing director of franchise for Fatburger. And so I went in there and I looked it up, and I looked at the cost of buying a Fatburger franchise in the United States, and you've got to have liquid $500,000 of cash, right? You've got to have a net worth of $1.5 million, and your initial investment is going to be anywhere from $375,000 all the way up to about $730,000. So that investment to kind of get into something like that can be cost prohibitive for a lot of people, but the upside is, right, there's something that's in place that you can just kind of plug into. And once you get that system, man, all you're doing is you're kind of plugging people into that system, and then you're off and running.
And there's other franchises that are less expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so I think it's a great way, if you can't develop the system, then you leverage somebody else's.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that I was surprised at in talking to Lance and listening to Sarah is just the spectrum, right? I think they have two different kind of pillars that or categories that most franchises fall into: sales and retailer, and they're not all super expensive like that. So
I would like to add one more con for a franchise, which is difficult for people who came from the S category.
Mm-hmm.
Like this would be difficult for me. Is the good side is they have a system for you.
Yeah.
Okay. The downside is you have to use that system.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little tweaking that you have to do. And for someone like me who does not like being told what to do, right? Like that would be very difficult.
Yeah.
But if you're good at following systems and rules, a franchise, a lot of great opportunity there in franchises.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Now the next type, tell us a little bit more about the third type that we're talking about of starting a business.
Yeah, that third type of starting a business would be kind of that network marketing, right? And that network marketing is, I think we're all kind of familiar with that. But the pros to that is that as opposed to buying a franchise, is there's a reasonable entry fee, right? There's not a lot of out-of-pocket costs for most of these, for some of them, right? You got a low entry fee, but the system is already in place. The cons is that, it's not always socially acceptable, right? There's a lot of connotations that come around with someone getting involved with network marketing. And, we've had experiences with both. So that's kind of what comes to mind there.
Now, a lot of times when people hear whether it's network marketing or multi-level marketing or MLM, they have this bad taste in their mouth, right? Or this bad expectation.
Yeah.
Do you think that's fair?
For some, right? I mean, what I would say is, what I tell people is, man, you can go into any business and you can find the good and the bad out of it. Mm-hmm. What I've seen with network marketing, and this is a big, broad category, is that over the years that I've talked to a lot of business owners, a lot of business owners have been involved in network marketing at one point or another. And really, when you get down to it, it's that draw of that passive income, right? I can work really hard for a short period of years, and I can have that residual income that comes in. And so that's really the draw. That's really what they go after. The other thing that I've seen that is actually really, really impressive to me in those is that, man, when you, right, we've got some clients that are very highly regarded, done really well in network marketing. And when you sit down with these guys and you talk to them, is some of the leadership skills that they possess are very, very impressive. I've gotten pretty close to a couple of them. And what I would say is that listening to these guys speak is, it doesn't matter what business you're in. It's more about leadership, is the education that they're providing, which is invaluable. I mean, that transcends network marketing. It rolls over into business. It rolls over into personal life. And there are absolutely some skills that are translatable across all fields.
Yeah. And I've seen I've seen people do really well in network marketing and people who did not.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed a big difference is how they viewed it.
Mm-hmm.
Those people who did well treated it as a business
Yeah.
and took it serious. They were all in. And there were some dips. It can be difficult to start out. Those guys plowed through those dips.
Yep.
The people who didn't or weren't successful didn't punch through it. And when they came to that adversity, like, ooh, this is, man, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So, but maybe that's you, and maybe that's not your style to do a multi-level. That's totally fine. But what I do want to say is I don't think all MLMs are bad. I think if you treat it as a business and you get a good mentor in your upline and you have working with a good company, it can be great. Like I've had clients that are making $1 million or more a month. And I've seen it because I was doing their taxes. Because I didn't believe it at the beginning.
I didn't believe you either.
Yeah. I've seen it. And I've got quite a few clients that are making over 6 digits, right? But those guys treat it as a business.
Yeah. So what we did, let's recap real quick, because I know that you've got a point that you want to add on here. I'm excited to get to it. But what we just discussed was really 3 ways that we can accelerate our journey from left side to the right side. The first one was to find a mentor, right? If you're going to go the traditional model where you're going to create the system and build the people into it, find somebody that's doing it already. The second one was the franchise model where you're buying the system and then you just need to plug in the people. And the third one, which was kind of high cost, and then you look at the third one being the network marketing, which was kind of a lower cost, lower entry point, and then kind of build it around there. And you've got one, the last one that you want to share, which is kind of our fourth one. I'll turn it over to you now. I'm excited to hear this.
I would say it's kind of a hybrid because you're leveraging somebody else's system, but you don't have to follow all of their. You can take that system, tweak it, and make it your own, and you're typically not paying an ongoing like franchise fee.
Yeah.
Right. And particularly now with the technology. Man, there's never been a better or easier time to start your own business, whether you can do so much stuff online. And particularly, there's people out there that will share their system for you.
Yeah.
Like we've had just a few in our podcast of Kyle Stanley of creating a business using Airbnb without owning the property.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's something that you can do, and you can take his system right here, show you what to do and how to do it. And there's even mentoring going forward. Now there is a cost to that.
Yeah.
Right. But when I say that cost gives you speed, right? If you're paying for his coaching, you might be able to figure it out yourself, maybe after a year or 2 or 3, but maybe you pay a small fee up front. And you can expedite that learning curve.
Yeah.
Like we've had a few different people about creating a business flipping land.
Yep.
Which is something that we've currently are doing. So we've bought their system. We've made a couple tweaks our own. They also have coaching. So we have paid for that coaching. But what we're paying for is speed.
Yeah.
We're paying for speed and time to build a business. Again, that's going to help us create that financial freedom where our pie is bigger than us.
What I've found, like you made some really good points there, surprisingly, Anthony, is that what you see today is, like you said, is there's so much information, with technology out there. There's so much information on the internet that you can find. Really, what I see people paying for is organization. Right? Is you get this information organized in a way that somebody can actually take action and kind of progress. And I like the comparison that you're making there is when you look at kind of that traditional franchise model, it is a very rigid system, right? They're giving you the system. They're saying, listen, you need to abide by these outline moving forward. Whereas kind of the hybrid model that you're addressing with some of the coaches in places, they give you kind of the framework to it. And they're like, hey, here's how I've done it. Here's how I've been successful. Feel free to tweak and modify it as you want. And both of them are really successful. Probably just depends on your personality on which one you fit in best.
Right. And we are doing a summer series, and we have about 9 to 10 speakers talking about various ways to create that financial freedom. And we will be talking a little bit about franchising, but there's a couple speakers that we have in there. Well, Kyle Stanley is going to be one, but there's some systems that you can plug in. So we're having the show notes of some details of that. But if you're unable to make it, we will be recording all of those interviews and be posting them on our website. Now, as we wrap this up, one thing I think is important for us to talk about is if you're on that journey of going and jumping from the left side to the right side, right? You're an employee or self-employed, want to become a business owner. Be prepared. You're going to get advice from everybody.
Yeah, be prepared or be very specific on who you're getting your education or advice from.
Yeah, and I would say, like, for me, I'm the guy, I like to get a lot of advice. I like to give it to you. But if before I do something, I'm doing my due diligence. I want to get information from a lot of other people. But the thing is, you got to be careful where you're getting that device from or that advice from. And particularly in something like this, be careful if you're getting advice from somebody who's on the left side. And getting advice from an employee or self-employed, you just got to take that with a grain of salt. What I would value more would be advice from somebody on the right side, somebody who's already done it. That advice is going to be valuable. And I also think it's kind of similar if you're doing infinite banking, right? If you go to the water cooler, can't go to water cooler anymore, right? With COVID, but you're in a Zoom room, right? Or you're talking to your buddies and you're like, hey man, I'm putting money in the whole life and I'm borrowing in it. And they're going to look at you funny, right? Because they don't know what it is we're talking about. So be very careful of who you get your advice from. I'm a big proponent on getting advice. Just make sure it's coming from a good source.
Well said. Well said. I think back of my journey when I started coming across this stuff, and I would take it to people and be like, man, did you know you could do this? And, they just immediately would beat up whole life insurance. And I'm like, well, why don't you like it? Just because they never had any information. Whereas, where I was getting my information was from somebody that has been there. They had the lifestyle, they had the cash flow and those things that I wanted. And so, I was young and dumb enough to not listen to anybody. So very fortunate.
Let's kind of end on this note that if you want to get that financial freedom, I don't think there's ever been a better time with technology. You can create a business from your house or literally from your phone. But the key thing is you have to learn, you have to get educated. But more importantly, you got to take action.
Yeah.
You got to put that education into action because there's a lot of people that, like, I think it's funny how many people bought Rich Dad, Poor Dad's book, but then how many people are incorporating it?
Yeah.
And that's because those people didn't take action. And that's what's going to distinguish people from the left side to the right side.
Speaking of technology and taking action, you guys want to talk about kind of next steps for yourself, there's going to be a link in the show notes to jump on a quick phone call, discovery call with Anthony or myself, about 15 minutes. We'll take some information from you. We'll ask you some questions and we can kind of point you in the right direction and see if infinite banking is a good fit for you and or one of these other opportunities that we have discussed.
Well said. Go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.